So here's a number that stopped me cold in my tracks when I first read it. 740 billion. That is how much addiction costs the US every single year. That spread is across healthcare, lost productivity, criminal justice, and so much more. What if I told you that number doesn't come close to capturing what it actually costs a person? One relationship, one job, one car repossessed. I'm Michael, and this is Quiet Minds, Rich Lives, a show where we talk honestly about the intersection of mental wellness and money. As always, we're going to a place that doesn't get enough airtime, and in the personal finance circle, that is addiction and what rebuilding your financial life in recovery actually looks like. I want to be upfront about something before we begin. This episode isn't going to shame anyone. Addiction does not discriminate by income level, education, or ambition. Today, what I would like to do is give you the real information, and I hope it reaches whoever needs it, whether that's you or someone sitting across the table from you at dinner tonight. Let's start by naming what actually happens to money during an active addiction, because I think people often underestimate the scope of it. And I don't mean that as judgment, I mean it as the damage is real, it's layered, and understanding the layers is the first step to undoing them. There's the obvious stuff, the direct cost of the substance itself. Someone spending $200 a week on alcohol, which doesn't sound like an extreme number by any measure, but looking at $10,000 a year, that will change your mindset on that number, wouldn't it? Prescription opioids misuse outside of a prescription can run $300 to $500 a week. Stimulants like cocaine can easily exceed $1,000 a week. These aren't small numbers. 10,000 and 52,000 and more is the estimated direct cost of sustaining a substance habit, depending on that substance. What about the iceberg underneath those numbers? Research consistently shows that people in an active addiction experience somewhere between 25% to 40% drop in work productivity. That translates to missed promotions, reduced hours for a significant number of people, job loss, everything altogether. Then there is healthcare. There is frequent substance use that takes a real physical toll on the body. Cardiovascular strain, liver damage, respiratory issues. We're talking regular emergency room visits, doctor's appointments, medications. And here's a painful irony: treatment costs money too. Rehabilitation centers, detox programs, therapy, all of it creates its own line item in an already strained budget. What about the legal fees? One DUI can cost upwards of $5,000 by the time you add up the court costs, legal representations, fines, and the resulting insurance hike. And for some people, it isn't one incident, it could be several. This all creates a compounding hole. Debt piles up on top of debt, credit scores drop from missed payments, savings gets depleted. In some cases, people borrow money from family, which creates a whole other layer of complexity around relationship and trust. There's a longer tail that also doesn't get talked about enough: gaps in the employment history, years of not contributing to retirement accounts, reduced Social Security benefits down the road from reduced lifetime earnings. The financial wreckage of addiction doesn't end on the day you stop using, it echoes throughout the rest of your life. I'm telling you this not to be bleak. I'm telling you this so that if you're in recovery or if someone you love is, you can understand why the financial piece feels so overwhelming, because it is overwhelming. The feeling is completely rational, though. Here's where I want to bring in something that is shame. Because, well, when we talk about rebuilding finances and recovery, we're also talking about the rebuilding of a relationship with yourself. That alone is the very core of recovery, rebuilding the relationship with yourself. Would you think there is a difference between guilt and shame? Guilt says this: I did a bad thing. Shame says something different. It says, I am a bad person. Which one of those two sounds useful to you? Well, what if I told you that guilt can be useful itself? In this information alone, it can point towards what needs to change. Shame, on the other hand, tends to paralyze a person. There has been research published in peer-reviewed journals that actually confirms this. High levels of shame are associated with delayed recovery. It makes it harder to take the first step, harder to ask for help, and harder to stay the course. Now let's bring money into the equation. Financial shame in recovery can have its own brutal spiral. You look at your credit report and you feel humiliated. You think about the money you borrowed from your mom, you feel like a failure. You want to address a debt, but you can't bring yourself to open the statements. And inaction breeds more shame, which fuels more inaction. In my coaching practice, I've heard people in recovery describe their bank accounts the way others describe going to a doctor. You already know something is wrong, and part of you would rather not have it confirmed. That's not a character flaw. That is a completely understandable response to a painful situation. There was also something else worth bringing forward. Early recovery can create new financial vulnerabilities. The brain has spent a significant period of time seeking dopamine through substances. When we remove those substances, the brain will want relief, and sometimes it finds it through spending. Impulsive purchases, retail therapy, gambling. These become substitute compulsions if we're not paying attention. What I'm trying to say is that the relationship between addiction and spending is not always linear. It doesn't just end when sobriety begins. Let's talk about what comes next, because the show is called Quiet Minds, Rich Lives, and I honestly mean that. I strongly believe in both of those things are possible, together even after significant financial damages. But I also want to be honest about what rebuilding actually looks like. First, it takes longer than you want it to. I'm over 7 years in recovery, and though I made a strong stride forward in my recovery with myself, my relationship, my career, my finances are not quite where I want them to be. But I'm closer than where I was yesterday. Most financial counselors who specialize in addiction recovery will tell you that the first couple of years are about stabilization and damage control, not growth. That's not a failure timeline like I once thought it was. That's a realistic one because progress is real and it's not always fast. Here's where we actually start. Step one is a financial inventory, not a budget, nothing yet. Just look. You can pull your credit report here, annualcreditreport.com, at least once a year with no charge. I will leave that website in the description of this podcast. You can do it for all three bureaus and save those PDF files at least once a year. List every debt you have: credit cards, medical bills, loans, money owed to people. Note the balance, the interest rates, the minimum payments. Here is the important part: do not judge any of it, just see it. That is it. The act of facing it, even when it's painful, is actually the most important step. Financial anxiety thrives in the dark, and when you look at it, you take some of its power away and you reclaim it for yourself. Here is a second tip: build in a recovery first budget. And I say recovery first intentionally because you're going through recovery costs like therapy, meetings, medications, support groups. Those are not luxuries, those are stability expenses. They go in the same category as rent and utilities, and they're non negotiables. A framework that I think works well in early recovery is an adaptive version of the 50-30-20 rules. 50% to essential needs such as housing, food, utilities, transportation, and crucially, your recovery costs. 30% towards debt repayments. You should split this to 15% debt repayment and 15% wants, if you can afford to, or change it accordingly. And 20% towards a savings cushion. Now, for some people in early recovery, the math doesn't work because income is low and debts are high. That's okay. Adjust percentages to fit your reality. The point of a budget is not to punish yourself, it's to see where you are and create a small amount of intentionality around where money goes. Address debt with a strategy. There are two very common approaches, such as the debt snowball and the debt avalanche methods. The debt snowball method means you pay off your smallest debt first, regardless of interest rates, while making minimum on everything else. The psychological win of eliminating an account can be powerful in early recovery. The avalanche method means you pay off your highest interest debt first, which saves you more money mathematically in the long run. Neither is wrong. The best one for you is simply the one that you actually stick to. Step 4. Begin rebuilding credit carefully. Credit scores during active addiction can often take a beating from missed payments and high utilizations. The good news is credit is repairable. It just takes time and consistency. A few approaches that work. Set up an auto pay for any recurring bill, even small ones. Payment history is the single biggest factor in your credit score. Consider a secured credit card. You put down a deposit, spend a small amount, pay it off in full each month. That on time payment history gradually builds your credit score. Check your credit reports for errors. They're more common than you think, and disputing them is free. Expect 12 to 24 months before you see major improvements. That's not a long time in the grand scheme of life. Celebrate the smaller milestones along the way. And then step 5, build an emergency fund before you do anything else ambitious. Even a small one, $500, then 1,000. Having any financial cushion at all reduces the likelihood of a relapse. That is not because of some abstract principle, but because financial crises are one of the most common stress triggers for relapse. An emergency fund isn't just a money tool, it's a recovery tool also. I want to spend a few minutes on the support system that actually exists, because one of the things that keeps people stuck is not knowing what's available to them. Nonprofit credit counseling is a resource that too few people in recovery use. Organizations that are members of a national foundation for credit counseling can help you create a debt management plan, negotiate with creditors on your behalf, and often do this for free or at a very low cost. Not debt consolidation companies with big advertising budgets. The distinction matters. Government assistance programs are another piece of this. SNAP for food assistance, Medicaid for healthcare coverage, housing assistance, and job training programs. There is no shame in accessing these resources while you stabilize. That's precisely what they exist for. Financial literacy programs are increasingly being offered through recovery centers, community libraries, and nonprofits, sometimes specifically tailored to people in recovery. Learning the basics of budgeting, credit, and saving as part of your aftercare isn't just helpful, it's genuinely transformative. The Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration National Helpline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I will have that number in the description below as well of this podcast. It's free and confidential. They can connect you not just to treatment resources, but to financial assistance programs and local support groups as well. And finally, some financial counselors specialize specifically in working with people in recovery. If money stress is a consistent trigger for you, working with someone who understands both the financial stress and psychological dimensions of this can be incredibly valuable. Ask your treatment centers for any referrals. Section 6, Closing. I want to close today by saying something I mean sincerely. Financial recovery, like recovery itself, is not a straight line. There will be months where you do everything right and the numbers barely move, and there will be unexpected setbacks. There will be moments when you open your bank app and you feel the urge to close it immediately. None of this is evidence that you can't do this, it's just evidence that it's hard. And hard things that are worth doing don't apologize for being hard. What I hope you take from today is this: the financial damage of addiction is real. It layers and it has a longer tail than most people acknowledge. And it is reversible. It's not instantly, not without setbacks, but one payment, one decision, 1 month at a time. It is reversible. Building financial stability is a form of recovery. Every time you sit down and look honestly at your numbers instead of avoiding them, you are doing recovery work. Every time you pay a bill on time that you weren't able to pay a year ago, you are doing recovery work. That deserves to be acknowledged. Thank you for being here. If this episode resonated with you or someone you know, please share it. Leave a review if you have a moment. It generally helps more people find the show. And if you're in a hard place right now, I hope something in today's episode felt like a hand reaching across the table. The stuff is survivable, and you are survivable. I will see you next week on Quiet Minds, Rich Lives. Until then, be gentle with yourselves. Take care.